But for the most part, I'd rather do my work with the knife rather than working it in, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
No gladiatorial combat for the reed.
Well, do you have any favorite reed tests that you can share with us?
Sure. I'm trying all the time to make the reeds from the sounds that they make and spending as much time doing that before I actually put it in the oboe. I feel like it helps me work more quickly and it helps me work more, objectively.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not too early on getting interested in in whatever sound it's making in the instrument. If I do it mostly by the crow, and even more important to me actually is putting the reed in my embouchure in my mouth in playing position and determining the quality and the pitch that I get from that. That goes quite a long ways to making me feel comfortable. So for me, when I do that test, I need a C natural to come from holding it in my embouchure in playing position. Not a rigid C, but certainly not a B natural. If it's B natural, it's going to be too flat for me and the high notes won't hold up enough. What that means then, often with a crow, the thread crow is going to be a little sharper than a C.
Some nuts and bolts. Can you tell us about your setup, the formula? What gouge do you use?
Sure. I like to use, for the sake of adjustability and, personalization, you could say, I like to use graph and graph style gougers. So that would be the Wolfeld machines from the 90s and now the lovely Harvard double reed gouger that John Ferrillo has produced, something in that territory for the ability that you have to adjust everything on it. So in that way, I guess I'm sort of a traditionalist. I've tried everything under the sun, I feel like.
Haven't we all?
Yeah. And I keep coming back to what is familiar and comfortable to me.
And what shaper tip and tying length do you use?
I like the Mac shapes. That's what I came up through school using. Mac himself was using the 1+, Mac Plus at that time. So as a student, that's what I was using too. And that carried me on through my studies and into professional life. I also like the 2+, the one that's ever so slightly wider. So things in that territory. I've tried, really, I do have quite a lot of equipment that I've experimented with over the years. And whether it's shaper tip, whether it's gouger, whether it's oboes, and I've played on all sorts of different oboes too. I guess the kind of tongue-in-cheek response that I have about that is, what kind of problems do I want to live with at the moment, Nothing seems to be exactly perfect. And if it is, it doesn't stay that way for very long. So it's a matter of kind of negotiating what problems do I want to deal with, and what's the trade-off? What am I getting that I like, and what am I willing to deal with that I don't like?
Do you have any preferred staples that you use?
Well, I liked the Stevens tubes when they existed, years ago. The new ones that are being manufactured don't seem to be exactly the same to me, but they're close enough. I like the number 2 thin wall. Something about the thin wall vibrates, I feel, more readily for me.
You spoke earlier about taking meticulous notes. So I want to ask, what type of measurements do you measure on your gouge-shaped piece of cane, and do you track?
Yeah, so I track 3 measurements on the gouged piece of cane religiously, and I have a little journal. I do it on my computer now, but for years I was doing it written longhand. Doing it on the computer has become an interesting, a byproduct of that is that I do it actually on a Google Sheet. So if I'm somewhere, well, this was more to do with before concerts stopped. If I was out somewhere and I thought to myself, oh, read number 47, what was this one? I could look on my phone and I could, go to my Google spreadsheet and look it up. And so that was, that's been useful to me. So 3 spots on a gouge piece, I measure the center just under the ears. So the part, on the very furthest edge, just about where it's going to get cut off from after I cut off the ears. And then I also measure the threads, the thread measurement, as in where the thickness at the point at which the shape exits the tube, the staple. So I keep track of all of those things, and that generally helps me understand what I'm dealing with.
And does the Google Sheet help you find any trends, or do you collect any general data from that, or is it just mostly a listing?
Well, if I look at it over time, then it does help me track trends, especially if something is kind of going off to the one side or the other. It does function as sort of a fancy list of things, but it's good to be able to have it all in one place, but then also just to have the notes. I mean, I could have kept doing it longhand in my little journal, but I kind of like this better now.
I think I smell an app that needs to be developed. Something that can show us some trends.
Yeah, that would be somebody's idea.
But that still doesn't negate the fact that we are working with something very organic that changes from piece to piece. And it's sort of hard to find trends when, you're basically making reeds out of grass, carrot sticks, sort of.
Right. And I've, for better or for worse, I'm somebody that's always tinkering with something or other. So,
Yes, yeah.
all the reeds in my box, I mean, I shouldn't say all of them, but to a large extent, there's going to be something that's unique about that. Like, was it a different piece of cane that I was, or, a different bag of cane that I was drawing? Was this a different staple or a different shaper tip or something like that? So if I've got a lot of things going on at once, then keeping a list and keeping track of what was what helps. And then I also take a little note as to what did I use it for? What did this reed end up playing or not?
Oh, now that's really interesting. I think I may be adding a column, yeah.
The thing that I use, and it gets, now that I've started with the whole density thing, it's like getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So.
Yeah, oh, right.
But it's interesting. And I mean, I keep a lot of reeds. Like, if they're successful, I keep them around. I don't tear them up. So I'm not always reusing a tube. So I've got an interesting collection of reeds in my closet here, from basically stretching back to when I started making reeds.
That's interesting. Oh, you could really chart your progress in reed making that way, or
yeah, and it's interesting to see how things have changed or not over the years.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit here, and I'd like to ask you a question a little bit more philosophical in nature. Mm-hmm. If you could go back in time, do you have any reed advice that you would give to a younger version of yourself?
Yes, and it would be make more of them. And I guess that's sort of tongue-in-cheek, but it's been said that it takes, I think, 10,000 hours to master something. And maybe that's kind of shorthand for, put in a lot of work. But I think you can probably quantify, like, say 1,000 reeds, whatever that, lines up with in terms of time. But if you made 100 reeds a year for 10 years, you'd make 1,000. And if you did more than that, you shrunk that down, you'd probably get quite a lot better quite a lot quicker. So, if you think about some kind of milestone number, I remember early on teachers, I don't think Mac would have said this, but early teachers of mine would say, oh, if you can fill up a laundry basket full of reeds, then you will have learned something,
Right.
So I guess what I would say to myself or anybody that's picking up the skill of reed making is the more you make, the more quickly you make, the better you'll get.
Excellent advice.
Do you have any wisdom to share regarding keeping a healthy balance between practicing and reed making?
Oh, I feel like I could use some help in that department sometimes myself. But it helps to have other things in my life that keep me engaged and interested. I love playing music. I love playing concerts. I miss it terribly right now. Mm-hmm. I love teaching. I love working with my students. It's really one of the most gratifying things in my life. But I also reserve time and space and energy for my family, and I love to spend time with my husband, and we cook together, and right now we're walking the dog, long walks every day, things like that. I don't know, things that just kind of take me out of it entirely and refresh and reframe, and I feel like I do a better job if I get that relief.
That is excellent advice. I think I need to take that advice to heart as well. Yes. Just something that, that takes your mind off of the reeds and the music for a little bit. You're very knowledgeable and handy with gouging machines and oboe maintenance and repair. How did you first become interested in honing these skills?
I don't know about knowledgeability and handiness, but it's something I'm interested in for sure. When I arrived at the Cleveland Institute, I had an oboe that was pretty problematic. It had cracked a bunch. I didn't know the first thing about adjusting it. And John Mack was somebody who was an expert at everything having to do with mechanical stuff, gougers, instruments, all the rest. And I remember so often, Saturday afternoons, he would come down to the Institute to fiddle, basically. He would be tuning notes on his oboe, he would be, filing the tone holes or putting in nail polish to lower the pitch of a certain note or something. He was constantly fussing with this stuff. And somehow I got invited to come and watch him do this. So I can remember Saturday afternoons countless times just sort of sitting there next to him, watching what he was doing, and he would sort of narrate. I think he liked to have the company, maybe. Mm-hmm. So I watched what he was doing, and he would, help me with my instrument. And so just seeing what was possible and what could be done, and that, he wasn't doing it and, making it seem as if he was some, holy figure, somebody that, unapproachable. He's saying, this is what I'm doing, and you could do this too, and this is how you go about it. And if you make a mistake, well, this is how you backtrack. Basically, he was giving me the tools and the confidence to kind of investigate this stuff myself. He worked on the first gouging machine that I ever had. It was a pretty, crummy old graph, and he spent a Saturday afternoon with me kind of doing battle with that and getting it into some sort of working order. And just watching him and, again, hearing his narration, okay, well, this is what you do when you move this, and it produces this result. Which isn't to say that just by watching him and then, going back to my apartment and trying these things out myself, I got myself into all sorts of jams and needed help from him and from later on others. I feel a real debt of gratitude to John Seimer. He's somebody that spent a lot of time with me over years, talking and helping with all sorts of mechanical things. But yeah, I think it was certainly Mac, and then later on, Elaine Duvas is also a do-it-yourselfer. Mm-hmm. She feels strongly about everybody being able to adjust their own oboe, and she's not so much into the gouging machine. She doesn't really have the time or the inclination with that stuff. But self-sufficiency, I guess, that was a big thing that was a common thread with the people that I studied with. I'd say that you want to be able to get yourself out of a jam. Or if you can't, at least the person to call to help you.
Right. And adjusting an oboe or a gouging machine is almost a separate art form in and of itself. Of course, we have our adjustment manuals, But there really is something special to be gained by sitting down with your teacher and having them model the process, which gives you the confidence